with special guest Joanna Glovinsky of Fruitstitute. Cheers. We are so happy to have you on the show and to talk about all things fruit trees. But first I wanted to start off with saying how we even got connected in the first place. Joanna?
So Connor and I got connected right before I started the Fruit Institute. Connor was the one who was like, you have to turn this into a business. You've got something. But I put a post on Nextdoor, which is like Facebook for your neighborhood, offering to teach my neighbors how to prune their fruit trees. And Connor was, I think, my first response. And Connor said, hey, I own the nursery down the street. Do you want to come in and teach a class? And so then I go in like 2 days later, and Connor being Connor, we became fast friends, and I taught the class. And then from there, I got a lot of other clients from that initial post. At that time, it was just me, and I was teaching people how to prune their trees. And then the demand for the service just became more than one person could handle. So long story short, maybe 2 to 3 months later, I filed the company and hired 4. I hired 4 of my friends who were artists at the time, taught them how to work fruit trees. And 2 years later, we have a lot of clients and are working all over LA County.
So Joanna Glovinsky is so famous now, we call her J-Glow down here at the nursery.
You call me J-Glow.
Wait. No, you have a number of nicknames, no? What is it?
Mistress Citrus.
Mistress of Citrus. That's my favorite one. Yeah, Mistress of Citrus. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you do have quite a name for yourself, because we got a lot of emailed questions in prior to this. So I think we should just hop right into the questions.
Sure.
I'm going to start with the first one sent in by Penny. Penny emailed us saying, I live in Glassell Park, and a few years ago I transplanted a few citrus trees from large pots where they're producing well into soil in an area in my yard right behind where the pots were. Since then, the Australian finger lime has died, the pink lemonade lemon is thriving, and the bear's lime produces flowers, then tiny fruit, and then the fruit drops off. All are and were in the same bed and get the same sunlight and water. Why do you think the lime is behaving this way? And could it be the proximity to a California black walnut on the other side of my fence?
That's it could. However, basically all of those things tell me that there are root issues with those trees, because anything growing in a container, it depends on how long the trees were in a container and what she did at planting, and then how well she planted the trees. So, Penny, it's really hard to say without inspecting what those root structures look like. And you can do that by pulling away the topsoil, or even just shaking the tree trunk slightly to see if there are roots in the soil. It sounds like the ones that aren't doing well, the ones that are doing the worst, have the least amount of roots established. And so I guess I'll go into what roots do. So roots, why I know that this is a root issue, and the root issue could have something to do with the black walnut that acidifies soil. So when there's not enough flowering, or when your trees can't hold onto the flowers or hold onto the fruit, or if you have if you've stunted growth above, it means that the tree does not have sufficient amount of nutrients and or water to basically metabolize and create that growth that we need above, and pull up enough nutrients and water from the soil to develop fruit and leaves and branches and things like that. So whenever we see stunted growth above, whether it be stunted fruit production or stunted foliage or something like that, we know that it's a root issue. And so it could be insufficient amount of roots, or poor quality soil that those roots can't pull nutrients and water that they need from the soil to develop. So you'd have to see it, but I would definitely try to shake the trees, make sure that they're like rooted and anchored into the soil. And if that doesn't do it, you could excavate the top soil to see what the fruits actually look like. If you see when things are living in containers, and containers are round or square, but their roots tend to grow vertically if you keep them in the container for too long, and if you let the heat get too big, so we start getting really dense root balls. And when those roots grow circularly, they start choking out a root ball. So you can see that if you excavate the soil to the root crown and you see what's going on in that when you find that root crown. And if you've girdled roots, chances are, you have to take up the tree and root from it. And depending on the age of the tree that you're not, it's probably going to be cheaper to get another tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's that question.
Right. So okay. So you can. So that's how you can inspect to see if it's a root development issue. But if it's a nutrient issue, which most things are, then you need to feed your soil. And growing anything is about growing soil. And how do you grow soil? You compost and compost and compost and mulch. And compost, what that does, it puts biology into your soil. And biology is what makes nutrients available to tree roots. And then you need, for fruit trees in particular, or for any hardwood tree actually, the best thing to feed a tree is a tree. So you want a hardwood mulch on top of your compost. And that mulch, what it does, it promotes good fungal diversity, and it's a host for the development of fungal life. And fungus binds to tree roots, and makes all of that nutrients that biology is creating into a water-soluble form so that the tree can consume that. So the more biology in your soil, the more nutrients more nutrition and nutrients get into your tree, that's what what creates flavor profiles in your food, nutrition, so the better tree you have. So compost, you can never have too much of it. You want to do it annually at minimum, compost and mulch. But in a case like yours, where it sounds like it's clearly a nutrition issue, if you can get those trees to grow roots, which compost and mulch will allow you to do, then those trees should be fine. I would compost and mulch at least quarterly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that old thing, Joanna, isn't it? A little bit of care all the time is really the key to growing all plants. Just to take that little bit of care all the time.
And it's really caring for your soil. If you got good soil, it's going to be fine. You're not going to have pest issues. You're not going to have, you have a nice balanced, resilient ecology that take care of itself. So, yeah, the more you care about your soil, the less work you have to do.
Absolutely. I have another question about fertilizing in soil and all that later. But I think one of the number one questions we get, not only about fruit trees, but literally everything, is about watering. I would love to talk to you about this. We also have a couple specific questions. Like Shelly sent in the question, I have a lovely mature orange tree in my front yard that I inherited when I moved into my home. The fruit size seems quite a bit smaller than past years, but it's juicy. Does that mean it's just being more efficient in its fruit making? Should I be watering it more? Or how often should I water it? And should I do it right next to the tree trunk or at the drip line?
Okay, so let's back up here. The first thing that people need to understand with their fruit trees is anything that is grafted, which basically they take the root of a tree that is pest and disease resilient, climate appropriate, size appropriate, and then they take the cells of the tree that you're buying, like the Meyer lemon, and they merge those two. So that's what a grafted tree is. And all of our commercial fruit production is grafted. So I always like to say, you're not going to find a Meyer lemon in the forest, and a Meyer lemon is not going to live in the forest. Trees need humans because we created them, and they can't live without them. So with Shelly's orange, small fruit is not what commercial growers, they're not designing fruit for small. Basically, when her fruit, she needs to, it's a nutrition issue. That's that at the end of the day. But when you do something like that, it's not that it's becoming more efficient. It's a sign that, so when there is inconsistency or something being stunted or something different and not necessarily different as in I'm thriving way, it's a sign that your tree needs attention. So with her oranges in particular, I think this is going to be the answer to all my questions. Compost. She needs to compost and mulch because you have to feed your tree because it's stunted in nutrition. And especially in the springtime, so many citrus you see, they're like they're done. And it's just because they gave their huge crop. And then they start looking really sad. And why is that? Because they just use all their energy that they've been storing and developing for, since the summer to put out their big crop. So anytime your tree puts out a big crop of fruit, small fruit, juicy fruit could mean that she's not underwater, but she's getting enough water. Small fruit like more about
Hey, Joanna.
Yeah.
Before you move on, can you move are you on your phone recording right now?
I'm on
your computer? Because you're kind of coming in and out with sound. And I'm wondering if it's because of like background sound, but maybe if you could like turn the volume up on your computer or
I can get headphones.
I'm going to adjust you in here and then we can keep going. But I just got a couple comments saying that they were having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Okay. Let's try again.
All right. So you want to read the second part of that question about watering?
Yeah. So then the next question is about watering, because not only did Shelly ask that, but we also had another question from Emily about how long should we water our plants, not in general, but specifically for the first year while they're getting established. So just overall watering really is a question, but those two specifics, how deep, how often, when they're getting established, is that different than in the future?
What do you say, Connor?
Look, it's a great question. I think when you have a mature tree, in my experience, they tend to be able to extract more moisture than a young tree because the root base is so much bigger. This woman's question is very interesting. Should I water around the drip line or should I water at the base? I would always water around wherever the feeder roots are, which are usually between the base and the drip line anyway. And then what those trees usually need is a long, deep watering. So it's like a low drip, drip, drip overnight for 12 hours. And maybe do it in 3 different places. If you draw a cross through the trunk of the tree and then go to between the drip line and the trunk and dig a little hole and let it drip in there so it doesn't just wash away. It's able to get soaked into that little area. It'll spread enough for the roots to pick it up. That's been my experience in with my own trees, as they respond very well to that. I also have a lot of fruit trees on grey water, and for some bizarre reason they seem to love it. Nitrogen. And I think it may be because there's nitrogen from soap and your skin cells and stuff that are giving the trees nutrients as well. It's anecdotal. I don't know the science of it. Is it true?
Yes, it's true. No, it's definitely true because it's nitrogen. That's what plants feed off of. That's why plants do really well above sewage lines and things like that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what all plants need is nitrogen. Well,
just to be clear, it's not on the sewer line. It's grey water, which comes from your shower and your washing machine.
Yeah, but Connor's exactly right with you want to do deep watering. That's slow flow for a long period of time. Shallow and frequent but short waterings encourages shallow rooting, and nobody wants to see shallow rooting. We want our trees to be deeply rooted so that they're nice and anchored into our landscape. When you deep water, if you think of a slow flow, like if you think of a drip, drip, drip for an hour, think of how saturated that towel is going to get versus a 2-second flow of. That's the same thing that happens with our soil when you do drip irrigation, and so the water will go as the soil gets saturated. So it's also the most especially great for soil penetration you can deep water in 12 hours, but that water can go really, 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 really far out. Why the method? Where to water? Connor's exactly right. In the under the you never want to water your trunk directly on your trunk because wood, when you put water on wood for a long time, it'll rot. So you want to keep your irrigation away from your trunk, and you want to have it basically roots go, yogurt roots go through the topsoil, and those roots they're defined feeder roots. You want they're the most dense, 3 inches like from the trunk flare out to the canopy drip line. The canopy drip line is the area under the canopy. So that's where you want to water. So in between like the middle, between the canopy edge and the trunk. Put your line in the middle there. And if big trees, you can do too. Younger trees, their roots aren't established, so you want to water the planting. That's where those roots
are. Yeah.
It just a little. I'm sorry, Joanna. You seem to be cutting out there sound-wise. Sam, can you hear?
Yeah, no, I think maybe Joanna, can you get headphones put in really quick?
Yep.
But while she's gone off to get the headphones, a nice solution for watering a mature tree is to get a 40 or 50 foot long drip hose. It's the rubber hose that seeps water out of the hose itself.
The soaker hose.
Soaker hose, sorry, yeah. And then just run that around the tree, and that disperses water at such a low rate you can easily leave that for 12 hours, and it won't. The water won't just roll away down the hill or wherever it wants to go.
Yeah. Another really good thing for irrigation and a lazy gardener way is the Oyas that you guys sell. I love them. They're, you know what I'm talking about, Connor?
Yeah, but if you, so say for a large fruit tree, would that mean that you should have 4 Oyas per tree at the drip line?
Yep. Yeah. But those are great because you can go away on vacation, fill up your Oyas. You know, you fill them up once a month, and the soil will take the water as it needs it. Sorry, guys, I'm getting sound in. Hold on.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, I mean, watering is like the biggest issue. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I might as well bring it up too. What is the difference between watering in a container tree compared to that in ground? How does that look different?
That's a great question, Sam. Joanna's going to be all over that.
You guys, you should send out at Fruitstitute. We did an irrigation video. It's on YouTube. You can find it. It's deep watering. Yeah. And I don't know. You guys have the link. Maybe we can send it out or something.
Yeah, I can include it on the video for this. Yeah.
Yeah. All of this information's in there. Yeah. So the ideal with watering is you always want to saturate water with cedar roots. Where are your cedar roots in a container? They are in the top of the container, and they go as far out as that container goes, as the soil is. So you want to thoroughly saturate the soil in that container, and you do that by watering until the water comes out the bottom. Okay.
Let's try this out.
Come on, Joanna, you can do it.
I did it.
Oh, so much better.
Sorry, guys. Oh.
That's all right. So you want to water the container until it's fully saturated, water's coming out that bottom bit.
Right. Because
And then would you...
Well, I was just going to say there, one of the reasons we use citrus soil in a container is because it's designed to drain. So the tree, especially citrus, it's not sitting in a big pool of water. It hates that. Mm-hmm. So if you're planting in a pot, you must use citrus soil or some other well-draining soil. Potting soil is not appropriate because it tends to retain water.
Yes, and it's too high in organic matter. You basically want a stable potting media when you're working with trees for your container. So you supplement that with your compost and mulch quarterly, but you want a really sandy soil that's got good drainage, so you could put perlite or vermiculite, which are minerals, so those don't break down.
And you could put wood chip mulch at the bottom, but a wood chip mulch that is going to break down really slowly. So something like a pine or a cedar that's also lightweight. Pine needles are great for container potting media because they don't break down, and they're really good for drainage.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard about that one before.
I've done my research. Next up is a Fruitstitute potting media for fruit trees.
Oh, perfect.
It's like making a sauce. Yeah, it's fun.
Amazing. Well, okay, so beyond watering, the next biggest question we get is about pests and disease.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, Sarah sent in the question to us, how to handle pests. She's been spraying with neem, but is there any more she can do? She said, is there any more? Should I not spray when the trees are in bloom? I'm wondering about that.
Right. So pests and disease, it's the same answer to the questions is that's an indicator that your tree is depleted, so you need to compost and mulch. When your tree when it's sick, so you can decide how you determine whether you treat the tree for the pest or you treat the tree for health is if other trees in the neighborhood have the same infestation. More often than not, it's your tree, the pest or disease is a sign that your tree is depleted and its immune system's compromised, so it can't fend for itself. So the first thing you do is you need to feed your tree, and you want to make sure you have proper irrigation. You want to work your soil, compost and mulch it. There's really great products at bigger supply nursery. Biochar products are amazing if you do it with worm compost. Anyway, so the first thing, unless you see the same bugs on all the trees around your neighborhood of the same species, then you want to work on tree health. And so your tree probably will need to be pruned as well. But if the pests or the fungus is on more than 20% of the foliage of the tree, then it's something that you probably do want to deal with because it's affecting the tree's rate of photosynthesis. So if the bugs are pervasive, that they're reducing the tree's ability to photosynthesize, that's when the tree will start to decline. So boost tree health, and that will usually take care of the problem before you have to spray your tree. But always boost tree health, and if the bugs are on more than 20% of the foliage, then you also want to treat the pests. So neem only works on hard body insects. It's an oil. If you think, so what do leaves do? Leaves, they photosynthesize, which is the process of turning the sun's energy into carbohydrates. And those carbohydrates then get stored on that branch and then the trunk and the roots. But they also, on really hot days, they pull up water from the soil and they evaporate that water. And that's how the tree cools itself down. It's the same thing as us sweating. So if you were to slab yourself in oil on a really hot day, you're going to fry right up. And so will the tree. The tree can't respire is the word that's how trees evaporate water from their leaves. So if a tree can't respire because you got oil on it, that's going to be worse than the pest or disease that you were treating in the first place. So whenever you want to do a horticultural oil, such as neem, you always want to do it end of day or really end of day is best. If we're having a heat wave, wait until it's over. And that is, don't do it when it's flowering, because if you put oil all over those blooms, nothing's going to pollinate. Nothing's going to want to come to those flowers. Fungal issues are the other big ones. Again, fungus is usually a sign that your tree's depleted, so you need to give it some TLC. But one of the things that we've been having amazing success with when we treat pests and disease, really we don't use neem or much of anything else but a biochar bamboo vinegar foliar spray. And Conor sells it at the nursery. It's amazing. We do it. We've tried so many things to treat all forms of pest and disease, and this one is just like a solution for everything. We put it in the soil, we put it on the wood, we put it on the leaves. We don't do it when the tree's flowering. because it's charcoal essentially. So what bamboo vinegar is, biochar is an ancient agricultural practice, and people have been making biochar forever. It helps soil hold carbon, and that's what soil wants, is lots of carbon, because that's sugar to feed all that biology. And as they're making the biochar, when they're burning that wood, that smoke, there's vapor in the smoke, and they collect that liquid, and that liquid becomes a vinegar. So it's every time you spray it, your yard's going to smell like a barbecue. And what it does, it's basically like it fortifies the biome on the foliage. So it helps the tree, it stimulates photosynthesis because it gives it like good nutrients. And then it boosts every leaf's immune response. So in higher concentrations, it's much more of a toxic pest repellent. And then in lower concentrations, it's basically like giving your trees a dose of, or it's like putting like probiotics all over your soil. Yeah. So I would
chicken soup for your tree.
There you go. That's exactly what it is. It's amazing.
Did a little bit of New Yorker just come out of you, Joanna?
I'm a New Yorker.
I know. I just heard.
While we're on the subject of pests, a big thing we're all talking about here in the industry is HLB and citrus silage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a lot like COVID.
No joke.
No joke. But it's not nearly as contagious, which is good. That's the good thing. But it is definitely, it's here to stay. It is, so Asian citrus psyllid is the vector for a bacterial infection that is decimating citrus crops worldwide.
And how would I know that's in my tree?
You don't.
Does it not make the little circles in the leaves? Is that not what it does?
I mean, it does, yeah. But you're going to start seeing that when, yes, that is how. So it looks like, the bug looks like a lot of other bugs that you find in citrus. You're right, Connor. The telltale sign is these like little white, what would you call it?
Little circles or little...
Like path marks. It's like...
the citrus psyllid is actually inside the leaf, and it's making these pathways while it's eating, and it creates a little circular blister almost on the leaf.
But that you can't, that's easily to be confused with leaf miner, whereas the psyllid, so leaf miner is totally common. I don't think I've seen a citrus that doesn't have leaf miner on it. Leaf miner looks like paths on the leaves. The psyllid produces, it looks like, this is almost crass, but like fish poop kind of thing. And that's how you can identify that it's the Asian citrus psyllid. It's like this white stringy stuff. So if you see that, you call the CDC. The CDC comes and they test your tree to see if that psyllid has given it HLB, Hellblong Bing, and that is the bacterial infection that is killing citrus trees. If you don't see the psyllid, how do you know if your tree has it? You don't know until your tree's starting to die. And once the bacteria shows up, which it takes about 5 years after the tree gets infected for the tree to start decline, for you to start to see symptoms of decline. And once it gets there, then there's really nothing you can do about it. So in China, this is hearsay, but a very good arborist friend of mine said that there's no citrus orchards under 10 years old because they just wiped out everything. Florida growers, they're having a lot of issues with it. And then lastly, it came to California, and it is east of Los Angeles and south of Los Angeles. So somebody put it, it's like, it's just a tsunami. It's going to happen unless we can figure out, a vaccine for it before they have to take out our citrus orchards. But it's definitely a commercial citrus production issue. Like, they're very worried about it because citrus is a big part of our economy.
But also their trees are so densely packed together, and they're probably more likely to have mass destruction from that than a local garden.
Exactly. And not only that, their trees serve one purpose, and that is to produce fruit for commercial production, right? So they are pumping their trees with everything. They're really not concerned with tree health at all. They're concerned with the bottom line. So backyard fruit trees, this isn't, unfortunately, backyard fruit trees, people don't know a lot about backyard fruit trees, so they're not very well cared for. But if you keep your trees healthy, its immune response will be able to, it will be able to deter getting sick and just live longer and be healthier, and it's less likely to get the bacteria.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Let me ask you this. I mean, what I'm getting from what you're saying is really interesting. It's basically take care of the health of your tree by mulching and composting and watering properly, and the tree will be more resistant to all these things. Is there any sort of a preventive measure you can use on your trees so that maybe even if they're healthy, it helps you prevent disease?
HLB?
Yeah.
Or so there's no sort of preventative measure for HLB that I know. Oh, there's research coming out about cover cropping, which again I think that goes back to keeping a healthy tree because it holds good water in the soil, so the trees don't get water stress. But other than that, cover cropping is great. We are starting to do it at our work site, at our orchard up there, and we're going to test out all these cool cover crops to see what trees like the most. But gotta compost and mulch, biochar, and then that foliar spray. And so the other thing is, like, if you keep your trees clean, so you don't want your trees growing into each other. Like to say, you don't want kissing cousins, because if they're growing into each other, there's not enough room for things to grow, and then there's not enough air and light flow, and then you get buildup of dingy stuff and icky stuff. If you don't, anytime you're in a tree, or if you get in trees often, but if you do get in trees often, you will know that there's so much dust and buildup and in a tree. Wash your tree down every once in a while. Keep it canopy sanitized, and your tree is going to be healthier, and your fruit's going to be delicious. And
I'm going to go home right now and canopy sanitize.
Spray it down with a hose. That's all you got to do. Spray it down. Do it once a month. If you think of buildup of dust and stuff on those leaves, if those leaves are like your skin, and you don't, you're outside for a month with no shower, clean it up. Yeah, and your tree will be so much happier.
All makes sense. Also, it allows much better photosynthesis if there isn't a big dusty film on the leaves, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So
nobody dirty fruit.
Yeah. I want to bring up this next one. We pretty much covered probably what your answer is, but I feel like it's like a underdog story here. So,
compost
no, yeah, compost and mulch. That can be our whole talk can be summed up. Like, do that. Like, forget about the rest.
And prune. You got to prune every once in a while.
Yeah, and prune. So Lucila sent in a question saying when they moved into their house 6 years ago, there was a mutilated tree. They thought it was dead, but it turns out it was a lemon tree. Suckers eventually started to grow out of the mutilated trunk, and those became new branches. I showed you a picture of that here.
This is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy how it was able to grow up out of this, basically dead stump. But given the damage it suffered under the past owners, it does seem to suffer from pests and aphids and a little bit more than usual. And so they're just wondering, is this tree not long for this earth? How do you help trees recover from past missteps? Rachel, that is a peacock you can hear in the background.
Somebody's in Altadena.
Yeah. So how can you help trees, fully recover from these past missteps, and what are your thoughts of coming up with a plan B?
Right. Well, this tree's always going to be broken, but it's still here. So, I mean, that's super cool. I'm surprised that it gives fruit and that the fruit is good, because it is kind of a Frankenstein. But it's not the first time that I've seen this with a fruit tree too, and that it produces the lemons that it's supposed to produce. Is there anything that you can do about it? You just got to keep the tree healthy. I think we covered that.
Compost and mulch.
Yes. and keep your canopy clean. So yeah. And if there's dead wood, you want to remove as much dead wood on the tree as possible. You're not going to be able to remove this whole stump, but dead wood attracts wood decay fungi, and wood decay fungi is how all trees die. Trees, their defense mechanism is to grow over any wound. So anytime they can't close a wound, it exposes them to wood decay fungi. So the more, as a tree ages, the more tears and nicks and breaks and damage it happens to that tree, and the more wood decay fungi is colonizing in all of those little wounds. So you want to remove as much dead wood as possible, but this is the trunk, so you're not going to be able to get the whole thing. Other than that, is it going to be here long? No.
That's it.
Well, I have a similar situation in the garden. I have a pomegranate tree that essentially died, and it was quite old, but the main trunk died, and it produced a huge amount of shoots all around it, which began to become big branches, and right now they have flowers on them. And essentially, what I feel is, all that new growth, it's basically fastened to a dying animal. So, when that main trunk root ball dies away, which it probably will not long from now, maybe a few years, it's probably done for, right?
Yeah. But pomegranates are different because pomegranates, they naturally grow with suckers, with shoots coming up from that root ball. So if you still have those live, you lost the main trunk, but you didn't lose those roots. And so that's your new suckers will actually, and those shoots, they will become a new pomegranate tree.
But I mean, it looks great because I've been composting and mulching like mad on this tree.
I know. I've heard. Dante told me.
Okay. I have a question here from Rachel. She sent in a few questions, but I think this is an interesting one about my citrus trees are blooming, pomegranate too. What do I do to encourage tasty fruit besides watering? And do flowers that attract pollinators, are they helpful to help the fruiting as well as should I be
pollinating?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the last part was, should she fertilize at bloom?
Mm-hmm. When in bloom.
So you want to fertilize after bloom, after the tree's fruited, or basically you want to fertilize at the times when the tree's undergoing a flush of root growth, which is in the fall and in the spring, which trees do to prepare for the summer and the winter, when it's either the active growing season or the slow growing season, due to the amount of daylight hours. So I like to fertilize after the citrus give their crop, because it's the spring. So they're really hungry. That's when they're the hungriest. Should you stay on top of it, you just want to fertilize once in the spring. There's markers of the growing season, which is the season that you should be applying your fertilizer. And typically you don't need to fertilize more than once a year, but you can remember, if you fertilize on one of these 4 days, you're good. So it starts on Valentine's Day, Tax Day, Memorial Day, Labor Day. Those are 4 markers of your growing season, and that's when you want to give your trees those macronutrients.
Great tip.
Thanks. Tom Spellman.
No better day than Valentine's Day to show your trees some love.
Aww, that's a great idea. Do you want to talk about fertilizer really quick?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what is fertilizer? Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus are macronutrients that all plants need to grow. But if you give your trees only those 3 macronutrients and don't compost and mulch, you're essentially like giving your trees a diet of like pancakes, pasta, and spaghetti. So,
meat, potatoes, and gravy, and no salad.
And no salad. Salad is in the compost, but not only. It's like you compost. Compost is living, it's biology, so it will proliferate amongst itself and create a really robust soil ecology. So you always want to compost when you fertilize.
All right. There you go.
Yeah.
Easy enough. Let's see. What do we do if the lime tree you planted last year has not bloomed at all?
Nutrition. And nutrition could be one of two things. It could either be your soil or your root establishment. So another thing that we see very often, and I think that this is important for your listeners who are going, or your clients who are going home and planting trees on their own, is more often than not, people plant trees too deeply. So we're thinking about feeder roots, those absorbent roots. They live in the top 6 inches of the soil, the topsoil, and that's where there's the most amount of biology, because that's where there's the most amount of air and water, because all life needs air and water. So those absorbent roots only they grow from the root flare and 6 inches down on almost any tree. So if you plant your tree too deep, you're basically stunting its ability to take up water and nutrients in the soil, because it's not going to be able to grow enough absorbent roots, because you're limiting the space that it can do that. So we always like to say flare in the air when you're planting. Keep that root flare up there, and that will...
So do you mean you should be able to see a little bit of the roots on the surface? Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's a big... It's a big mistake, I suppose, people make. They think those roots need to be covered. So they tend to overcompensate and cover the tree too much with soil. Yeah. That's a really good point. Flare in the air.
We see it all the time. And there's so many clients that we have who just planted trees, and they call us because we're like, we just planted these trees and they're not doing anything. And all we have to do is dig out those roots, and a month, 2 months later, after compost and mulch application, it's a whole new tree.
So technically you could dig out around the base of the tree till you find your flare, and maybe just put some mulch on top of that, right?
Yep.
And then you're exposing the flare. You've got your flare in your air.
Yep.
And then the tree will respond to that. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
That's a really great tip.
It'll immediately start growing those absorbent roots.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Good.
Easy fix. This is another question sent in by Rachel, and it's something that my parents had an issue with too. They bought a beautiful honey mandarin tree from us a couple years ago, and it's grown so well and has produced insane amounts of fruits. Rachel has the same question. It's the fruits, as the branches are growing, it's going to weigh down these branches. Should they be doing any trimming or supporting these branches? What is your recommendation on that?
Yes, if the tree can't support the weight of the fruit, you got to thin it. But there's a few issues to start with, though. So, this is why fruit trees don't survive in the wild without humans, because we've designed them to produce so much fruit that it can't support the weight of that fruit. You don't want to have a branch break. If a branch breaks, not only is all the weight putting all the stress on that wood that's going to compromise that branch for the rest of the tree's life, but if a branch breaks, and if it's a big branch, then you have this huge open wound that is going to attract wood decay fungi, and it's something that it's a big wound that the tree will have to live with, so it will reduce the tree's longevity. But more importantly, when you get a new tree, you want to do what we call formative pruning, and this is essential to raising a fruit tree right. And formative pruning is training the tree to grow with a nice, balanced branch architecture. So you find those main scaffold branches, and you train them to grow in a way that can evenly distribute the weight of the fruit and the leaves and the wood, because all of that is very, very heavy. So if you just let your tree kind of grow willy-nilly, and you have a very asymmetrical canopy, you're going to get all your fruit on one side of the tree, and then that tree is going to be completely off balance forever. And you're likely going to get a big breakage. So you want to avoid that from happening in the first place. by doing that formative pruning and training that tree to grow with a nice balanced form. And then you get a nice even distribution of fruit. If you did or did not do that and your branches are being weighed down by the weight of the fruit, the tree can't handle that. And not only that, if the tree can't support it, the tree also doesn't have enough energy to bring all that fruit to maturity. And that fruit's just not going to be that great. So if you were to thin it to the point that the tree can support it, you're also allowing your fruit to get riper quicker. And there's going to be more nutrients in the fruit that's left on the tree. So that's how you grow delicious fruit.
Quick question there. If I have to cut a big limb off the tree, or if a big limb breaks, is there something you can put on the exposed scar or the exposed...
I'm so happy you asked this question. No. Pruning sealant is it's completely debunked in arboriculture. So pruning sealant, what they used to do, they used to put like roofing tar on trees. What that does, so wood needs to respire. And trees are living, and so it needs to breathe. And if it gets wet, which it always does, it basically collects moisture, and then you get wood decay fungi. So never, ever, ever seal your wounds with any sort of petroleum-based product, but any sort of sealant in general. It just leads to more decay.
You just have to let it heal itself in its own way.
Let it heal itself. That's what trees are made to do. That's their defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to heal their wounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good question.
Yeah, we got some really good questions.
I know.
I know that the question about the thinning out the fruits though is hard for people because they see all these beautiful fruits on their tree and they're like, "What do you mean you're telling me that I have to cut some of these off?"
Okay,
it's hard.
I'm going to come in here with the rule of fruit trees. The rule of fruit trees is a third for the earth, a third for the animals, and a third for you. And if you want any more than that, you're being greedy.
I love that. We always like to say, like when my clients talk to me and they're like, the critters are getting all of my fruit. And it's like, well, that's your tax. Like, you're never going to win. You have to make your trees productive enough and large enough. So you have to have enough space that your tree can get large enough so that there's enough fruit for you and them. But I have so many clients where it's like, they're breathing down our necks when we're thinning the fruit on their trees and just like, you have to trust me. You're going to we're going to do it once and you're going to reap the rewards and then you're never going to be concerned about this ever again. And even whenever anybody on my team, when they have to thin the fruit and it's their first time, they're like, I feel bad. It's like, no, just wait till you get peaches this big and they're the most amazing peaches you've ever had and you will never feel bad again. You got to thin it to win it. I'm full of them today.
You are full of them. I was thinking we could come a compilation of Conorisms through this series, but we're going to have to have Joanna in there too. So I have another question sent in about tree placement and where you're planting, speaking of their space and how big they need to get. Mark sent in a question about planting trees close to your house. He's been reading on the internet that people do not recommend planting within 6 feet of your foundation, but is wondering, is this really true? Are there certain varieties that need to be planted far away or have invasive root systems? He has a very large collection of fruit trees, everything from citrus, figs, apricots, and persimmons. Are there any of these trees that are absolutely don't put them close to the house, or is it a go ahead?
So... 2 answers to this question. Number 1, in general, fruit trees, anything that has been grafted and cultivated for commercial production has a non-invasive root system. If you think of why they were made to be packed in tight so that they could maximize fruit production. So you can plant fruit trees in really, really small spaces. But if you think of planting, so those absorbent roots are what take water and nutrients up from the soil, and they live in the soil where there's air and where there's water, so they live in the topsoil. So if you have only a small amount of exposed soil for those roots, it would be the equivalent to planting in a container. So you don't want to let your tree get larger than your tree won't be able to grow that big if there's not enough of exposed soil to plant the tree in that location. Or it will, and then it won't do well, because you don't want your trees to, you want your canopy to be proportional to your roots so that they can sustain each other.
Yeah.
So in general, you can plant fruit trees close to your house.
Okay. And so then that brings me to the topic of container gardening. You know, a lot of us don't have the luxury of having a big backyard, or we're renters and we don't, you know, can or don't want to be planting fruit trees in
Right.
the yard. I mean, Connor and I have certain guidelines on what we recommend as far as containers go, but is there something that you recommend, like a size, minimum size requirements for citrus or pomegranates, or maybe there's a couple trees that you definitely, they just shouldn't go in a container?
Most trees should not go in containers. Almost all trees, with the exception of citrus. I think citrus does well in containers. Pomegranates you can get away with, and only because you guys have really good pomegranates in containers do I say that. Figs you can get away with too, but I don't like planting anything in a container that's smaller than 2 by 2 in the internal diameter.
2 feet by 2 feet.
2 feet by 2 feet. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's a fruit tree, so it needs to be large enough to produce fruit. You can, if you want, 3 oranges, you can plant it in a smaller container, but that's not really good for the tree anyway. So if you have, the trick to growing a tree in containers is to keeping the canopy proportional to the size of the container, so that those roots are proportional to the size of the canopy, which is what it has to feed.
When you say proportional, are you saying that the above ground part of the tree should be the same size as the below ground?
Yep.
So
2
the
feet.
size of your container is going to determine the size that your
of your
canopy
tree.
should be. Yeah,
Yep.
interesting. That's really
Yep,
good.
definitely. Yeah, so I think like kumquats do great, and mandarins do great in a 2 by 2.
Because the trees are relatively small anyway.
Yeah, and the fruit's small,
Yeah.
so you'll get enough fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
You can do oranges, grapefruits. Like you're not
Everyone
going to get that
always-
many fruits.
Yeah, everyone always wants to plant an avocado in a container, and I always
That's
say just
a
don't
horrible
do
idea.
It. Yeah,
Don't do it.
But they want to, because the idea of having avocados on your patio is, great.
Nobody has avocados on their patio. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. You're
It
right.
doesn't. And that's just because of the nature of avocado trees. Avocado trees grow huge, but they also, more so than any other fruit tree that we work with here in our climate, they have very shallow and really dense feeder roots. So they need a lot more space than the size of the tree, actually. So avocados don't work in tree wells. They don't work in areas where there's a lot of concrete. They really need a sprawl.
Yeah. But say someone is, in a moving transition, like how long could they keep those trees in a container, without killing them or without really hurting them?
An avocado tree?
Yeah, or avocado.
Avocados are always miscellaneous. In general, as long as they can keep anything in a container, as long as they keep the tree small enough, keep the canopy small enough. If they let it overgrow, if they have a tree that's been in a container for a while and they haven't pruned it back, and if it's a lot bigger than the container, then it's very likely that those roots are circling and circling and circling, and that tree, very soon, the tree will start to decline. So you'll see defoliation, you'll see all the signs that look like nutrient deficiencies, you'll see stunted fruit production, and then you got to root prune if the tree can handle it, depending on how bad.
Are you saying that the roots grow in a circle and kind of strangle the tree? That's what happens? Okay.
It's called girdling roots.
Okay.
So that's what happens if you leave your tree in a container and you let the canopy get too big, then those roots are going to continue to grow to feed the canopy.
Yeah.
So if you keep the canopy small, then the roots aren't going to have massive shoots of growth every fall and spring. And so you're basically de-invigorating root growth by controlling the size above. and then you don't have to take the tree out and root prune it every year, which is such a pain to do. And like trees are heavy, really, really heavy.
Just a little tip I was going to add in there. There's quite a lot of customers come in and they show me a picture of a pot they want to put a tree in, and a lot of the time the pot will be curved. It'll be like a curved shaped pot instead of a straight sided pot. And I usually tell them not to ever plant in those, because what happens, Joanna, if you plant in one of those pots? You can't get the tree out, right?
Oh,
if you ever want to move it.
Very good point. I was just thinking that's like stunting the absorbent roots above because it's going like this. Yeah. But
so you'll have to break the pot if you ever want to move it. Yeah.
Which also isn't easy. We've had to do that before.
So straight-sided pots if you're going to grow fruit trees in pots.
Yeah, you've got great ones.
Yeah, 24-inch tree boxes. Well, I mean, that concludes all the questions that were sent in to us. Is there anything that you think that we didn't chat about? Or Conor, maybe you have a couple questions.
Can I ask one question? A guy called me today, I believe his name is Dan, and he has I believe it's a lime tree, and he's a large branch growing out of the base of the tree. And he wanted to know, I asked him to send pictures, but I haven't really looked at them yet. He wanted to know, is that the rootstock growing out of the base of the tree, and should he cut it off?
Sam, we did see this photo, right?
Yeah, we did. It's a weed, right?
It's a weed, yeah.
It's not a branch going out of the tree.
That's not a tree. No.
Okay, Dan, excellent job on plant identification.
I guess, so Fruitstitute, little plug for the business, how we work?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So we're actually the only fruit tree service for backyard that services the residential market operating in the county. So how we work, if we take care of our clients' backyard trees, we do their seasonal pruning and feeding. We make our own compost and mulch in-house. It is magic.
What's your mulch called?
It's called Mulch Love. And the
Mulch Love.
It's called Chocolate Thunder Compost. Mulch is almost ready to be sold retail at the nursery. We've
had so many requests for this mulch.
It's
unbelievable. It's coming. We have a bunch of chips curing. So
can you talk a little bit about the mulch? Because one of the things you explained to me that I thought was fabulous was you told me that it's so much better to have a mix of different species of trees in your mulch instead of just one type of bark mulch that you'd get at the big box store, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So good. The definition of mulch is the organic material that you use as a top cover. What we've already talked about is the best thing to feed a tree is a tree. So any hardwood tree, you want a hardwood mulch. The best thing for a hardwood plant is a biodiverse woody mulch. And why we want biodiversity in our wood species is because that promotes different fungal populations. So our Mulch Love is we get select wood chips from arborists. So we're now getting felled trees, so we're getting whole trees. And then we chip our fruit tree trimmings that we get from our jobs, and then we mix it. Well, we have to let them sit so that they compost and any pathogens are burned out. And then we mix it, and it's a beautiful, lovely tree.
Love mulch.
It's so good.
So good.
Yeah. And then we make our compost. Compost is Chocolate Thunder Compost. That's magic. And so if anybody's interested in hiring us, how we work is first step is schedule a consultation. It's $125 for the consultation, and we do a site assessment and tree assessment, and then from there we put together the seasonal care your trees need. And we also can teach you how to do it if you're interested in learning yourself.
And one of the great things about what you do is it's a very, very common problem. There are so many mature yards in this area, and I'm sure in Southern California all over, that the trees have been there for such a long time, but they've never been taken any care of.
Exactly.
People have this idea, you plant a tree and you just leave it there and it'll give you all this lovely stuff. But it's the opposite, right?
Well, for fruit trees, definitely. Yeah. Definitely for fruit trees. Yeah. They just need a little, and they'll give you a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we love Fruitstitute. We're in strange times right now, but typically I would defer all and any questions about fruit trees to Fruitstitute and be handing out your card every day.
Where should people email you?
Info@fruitstitute.com. You can go to our website and all the information's there. Yeah. This was so much fun.
This was so much fun. Cheers, guys.
I know. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, finish yours. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you so much, Joanna, for your time, and Connor.
Thank you, J-Glow.
Thank you.
And
I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay, see you on the next one.
All right, awesome.
Bye.
Bye.